This is the 2014 Chevy Cruze. Has a 1.4 liter turbo engine. We've put a water pump on it. We put a head gasket on it. We put the main housing for the oil filter that was leaking water into the oil. We've put the evap solenoid on it. We put a new valve cover on it. But when you start changing stuff, if you change it randomly and the valve is out inside of the intake, then it just blows this other stuff out. It blows your crankcase ventilation valve there that's made into the valve cover, so you have to replace the whole valve cover. Then it blows the valve out in this crossover pipe that goes to the intake from the turbo. It's part of your evap system, part of your, I guess, EGR system. But when that valve blows in that intake, it causes pressure to build up inside of the block, inside of the crankcase. It blows this PCV valve out. It'll blow oil out around your oil cap. And it can cause all kinds of oil leaks, which we've got an oil leak on the front of the engine that's coming out of the valve cover. So you can chase this like we've been doing. We've been chasing solenoids. We put a valve cover. We've done all this stuff and chasing it. But what you need to do is there's a one-size-fits-all kit for this particular motor. It's made by Dorman. It's an upgraded kit that has each piece, and you replace them all at once, and then eliminates the issue. Let's take a look at the kit. This is the kit. It's a Dorman 615-380 kit, and it's for the 2011 to 2016, I believe. 2011, 2016 Chevy Cruze, and there's a bunch of other models that this fits that has this 1.4 Opal motor in it. So there's the kit. It comes all in one box. You get a new oil ring for the oil cap. You get a new valve cover that has the new crankcase ventilation valve in it. And you have to replace the valve cover, or they sell a little kit, but why waste your time when you can get the entire kit? You also get a new intake that has the new valve in it. And we look down inside the other intake, and that's the first thing you check, if that little orange valve is blown. Let's see if we can see it in this. Yeah, you can see it. I don't know if I can get a light down in there. There we go. Can you see the little orange valve down in there? Well, that little orange valve, if you look down in top of this hole in the factory intake, and that orange valve is not visible, then you've got turbo pressure, boost pressure going into your engine. It can also let, when it's under vacuum, it can let it pull oil and other things into the engine when we found oil in the turbo. So when this thing goes bad, when that goes bad, it causes all this other stuff to happen. This little hose here goes from the turbo. I'm not sure what this hose is called. It has a vacuum line on it, and it's part of your evap system, but it's got a one-way valve in it. And whenever that valve inside this intake blows, it blows this one-way valve out in this hose, and also blows this valve here out. So you end up replacing them all, but if you just replace them one at a time, you're just going around in circles, round and round, and you just keep chasing it, but you never find it. But starting with this kit now, and they are aware that this is the problem. You replace the intake manifold, you replace this hose, you replace the valve cover all at once, and of course your oil cap seal, and then you shouldn't have this problem anymore, at least for a while, unless you've got other issues going on with your engine. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to try to drag, first thing we're going to do is drag this intake off. Got a few things to disconnect. You do have to take the injectors. I'm hoping we can take the injectors off of the intake and replace them right here on the table. Tyler's removing the fuel line. We've got some of the other lines loose. We got one of them little tools that should pop it right up off there. Careful, it'll probably spray fuel on you. Be sure to disconnect your battery whenever you're fooling with this stuff. Always do that first. Okay, Tyler's already took the air box off. He's took the intake tube off that goes to the air box to the turbo. You can see down in the turbo there's oil. There shouldn't be oil in there, but it's coming through this tube right here. That means that one-way valve in this tube is probably blown. So this is one of the parts in that kit. You got to take this tube off and replace it. So that's the first thing he started doing. It's got a little vacuum line that goes down underneath the intake that's got to come off, and then this piece will be off here. We're going to fool around and start taking this intake off, and then we'll be back. He's got the fuel line off. They sell these little kits right here. I think this one come off the Mack truck, the tool truck or Macco one. They're cheap. They just go up inside that fuel line so you can lift it off. They released a little clip inside of it. These are made for all different size fuel lines and all kinds of different lines. Okay, we've got the intake off. Getting the intake disconnected was no problem, but the stupid clips that holds the wiring harness to the back of it were a pain in the butt. So Tyler's going to take this valve cover off, and he's got to take the coil out. And here's the other one. There's a whole bunch of stuff's got to be transferred over to this new intake. You've got the fuel rail. I guess that's mass airflow. There's a couple other things. I guess this little rubber grommet. This little thing. There's some more valves on the bottom. And I'm probably pouring gas everywhere. A couple hoses and a valve on the bottom. And that's about it. What I'm interested in is that little orange thing in there. It is gone. Get it where it'll stay here. It's a Bosch fuel rail. You look down in there, it's hard to see. There is no orange diaphragm. Let's see if I can shine down this way. Look at it without pouring fuel everywhere. Yeah, it is gone. So that was eaten by the motor, and when that blows, everything else goes out. Starts messing with everything else. So I'm going to get started switching this stuff over, these injectors things, to this new intake, and Tyler's going to get the valve cover off. And we're going to take a look at the motor when he gets the valve cover off, and we'll come back then. Tyler's putting our valve cover back on. While he's doing that, he and I switched this over here over. We put the fuel rail on. I guess map sensor, throttle body. There's a little piece in here on the bottom that goes on a little vacuum solenoid. And all that's on there. Put the fuel rail in. Now the cool thing about this kit is you don't have to have a manual to use it, because it comes with all your torque specs. It only gives Newton meters, but that's fine. If you got a little inch-pound torque wrench, you can use it in Newton meters. And so we put the little bolts in. It does come with self-tapping screws rather than the threaded inserts it was in the factory intake. But this intake does say made in USA. It's a Dorman product. And so far everything fits nice. Everything went in. It does come with new O-rings for your fuel rail. You can take the old O-rings off. I didn't realize it had those, but it had a little bag of O-rings and screws in it. And we got these intake bolts. 6 of those intake bolts goes in. 1 on each end, and then 4 in the center. And he's just about to get the valve cover on. And in a little bit, we'll have this, get ready to start putting this intake on. Okay, the valve cover's back on. A new O-ring on the oil cap. You gotta make sure you put that on. Now, I'm losing more batteries than I am time on this. Now we're going to go ahead and try to get this intake in. Now that we get everything switched over. The intake manifold is back on and reconnected. There's a few little things under the bottom that you have to put wire ties on. And Tyler's hooking the cold air intake up now. The cold air that's coming from the intercooler. So he's getting that side done, and got a few wire connections made. Now we did have to torque this. You have to have an inch-pound torque wrench. You start off when you put your bolts in. There's 6 bolts, 1 on each end, and then 4 in the center. And those bolts will torque 2 Newton meters initially, and you get them all seated at 2. Then you go back through and torque them again. Start from the center out, and in a spiral pattern, torque them to 20 Newton meters, and that'll get your intake set. And you got to have an inch-pound torque wrench. You got to have a few things to to do this job here, got to have a few little specialty tools, but that's really one of the biggest things is the inch-bound torque wrench. I just bought a cheap one. We already had one, but it didn't go down to 2, so we got a smaller one. But now we got to put, I guess, the air intake system back on. Then we got to put that crossover pipe, that little pipe that we told you that the valve goes bad in. So to recap, we put the valve cover on. We put a new intake on that's, I guess, a newer design from Dorman. And then we'll put that crossover pipe in. It goes from the turbo back to the intake. And that should fix all of our breathing issues and keep it from squirting oil out everywhere just because it's overpressured inside the block. Here's our Dorman part that came in the kit. It's that little crossover pipe. I'm not sure what this little pipe's called. Maybe it says up here. PVC hose is all it says. And that's the part number. 46829. It's a Dorman product. Of course, that's made in China. But all it is it's just a little hose with a vacuum line on it, and it has like a one-way valve in it that keeps, I guess it keeps boost pressure from going into the block when the engine's under vacuum. I don't know exactly which way this works, the way this tube works. I don't know if it keeps boost in or vacuum out. I don't know. But we're going to put this on. It did come in the kit, but you can buy it separately. But there's no point buying all this separately when you have to replace every one of these pieces anyway. And it comes, like I said, it comes with the little instructions for the 1.4 turbo air intake manifold. It has all your Newton meters for each part. Map sensor tightens to 3 to 5. The throttle body tightens from 9 to 11 Newton meters. Manifold bolts, there's 6 places. You got to do it in 2 passes. You go from 2 Newton meters and then up to 20. And 20 feels like a lot of pressure when you're tightening about it. It just feels like you're pulling hard, but that's what it says to do. You can also use your shop manual if you've got one, but we just follow the instructions here without getting the manual out. And you do need to know a torque sequence on those intakes. And that's more looks at the pieces that you're looking for that's missing. It's one of the first things I've got from like Dorman that actually had instructions with it. You hardly ever get these fast kits that's got any instructions at all, but this is pretty complete, and it had extra parts that we didn't think that it would have. The magnet. You know where it went? Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I think we've got everything back together. We've got that little crossover tube on. This thing's magnetic. It ain't gonna stay. Hold on, we need to find that magnet, Tyler. Now we ended up using a few. I said a while ago we had some specialty tools, and these are those. I don't know what they're called, external torques. And I think it was an 8mm that we were using, Tyler. This external torques. It's a 10. It's an E10. It's different than a 10mm. It's an E10 external torques. And we did have to get a rack of these for this car. If you're ever going to work on one of these cars, you're going to have these Torx bits. There's just no doubt about it. And we use these pliers. These are like line clamp pliers for those compression clamps. They've got a slot in them across the end and a slot across the side where you can get in there and grab those clips and they won't spring out of your hand. This holds them pretty good. These have been pretty good pliers. These you don't have to have, but these are for getting in there and cutting those push pins loose that you can't get loose under the intake. You just reach back in there and snap them. Or you can use these push pin pullers. That's just a lot to say. But if you can get this under the push pins, it'll pop them right out of the intake. Then they might be reusable. But unfortunately, we ended up having to cut them because we couldn't get it loose. These are things you don't have to have. These are optional, but they're handy to have in something like this. You got to have this little torque wrench. Of course, you need a magnet. You're going to need a magnet. Just admit it and face it. You're going to have a magnet. Stuff's going to fall. Another thing we was using is one of these little, it's like a little speed socket. You can reach in there and get a hold of those. Whenever the ratchet won't work, you can take your fingers and spin the extension or the socket. And that's just a few little things that we had to have. We didn't really have to have nothing else special other than this. Some Torx bits and these external torques. And that's about it. Looks like Tyler's got the intake and everything back on, and the air box. But he's probably gonna have to dry this. It's had some oil in the intake system, and one of the biggest codes we've been getting on this car is efficiency, catalytic converter efficiency low. We've been getting that for a while. And it's also had a little whistle, and the whistle is that valve cover will blow out that PCV, positive crankcase ventilation. It'll blow out and it'll whistle whenever you're driving. It sounds like the turbo whistling, but that'll chirp. And I think we've got everything put back together. There might be our intake line or something under the bottom. We'll use a mirror and look down there in a minute with a light. And I think we've got everything plugged up. We don't have the little cover. I think we've had this valve cover off so many times that we broke the cover, so that's something I could pick up. It's very cheap on Amazon, and we just got tired of trying to make it stay on, so we just gave up and left it off. Fuel lines back on. That's another thing you'll have to have. You'll have to have a specialty fuel line tool to get those off. You can get those at any parts store, and they're pretty cheap, just little pieces of plastic. But I believe we're ready to go. Tyler, you wanna? Well, the battery cable's off. We'll get this battery cable on. We'll start it up. Here we go. Well, no whistle, no chirp. For it. Oh, let's try this again. We didn't have this hooked up. It started revving wide open. Oh, now it's going to be hard to start. There it goes. Looking like it's running wild there for a minute. Everybody misses stuff sometimes. Yeah, that's why you check and double check. That's not clicking anymore. That evap solenoid or whatever it is. It's really idling down now. Now he's gonna have to drive this for a few days and let it clean itself out. There's oil in the catalytic converter, of course, so the efficiency is gonna be low, so it's gonna keep the check engine light on. He's got a computer in there that he can go in and clear all his codes and read his codes. He carries one with him because we've had so much trouble with this thing. We have to keep the computer in the car just to keep it going. But now we should have this taken care of. We've got the new intake on it, new valve cover, and this crossover pipe here that whatever it is, but it's got a one-way valve in it that has to work. And I think it was pulling oil right out of the intake, pulling it right into the turbo when it was under vacuum. So it's crazy stuff. But let's hope that we've got it. We'll check it around here in a minute and do our final thoughts in a minute. Okay, final thoughts on the Dorman kit. Let's see what that part number is again. And it's still daylight. We got done while it was still daylight. That never happens. It's a kit. 615380 kit for the intake manifold and valve cover kit. It's an easy fix. It's pretty comprehensive. If I can understand it, anybody can. And it comes with all the instructions. You know, some pretty easy instruction. It tells you about the O-rings. It's got a few warnings here and there, but it's pretty easy. Even the box has a bunch of warnings on it. When installing, check intake for manifold for failure. We did. Our manifold had failed, and of course we had everything we needed. We just had to provide a few tools, but it worked out good. So this is our, what is it, 2014 Chevy Cruze? And we've done a lot of work on this, and they're very popular videos. The video we done on this thing, what was it, the coil pack? Mm-hmm. A lot of people watched that video and commented on it, and it was a quick fix, but it wasn't a permanent fix. We unplugged the coil pack, cleaned the coil pack connector, plugged it back up, the car fired right off and run right on. But we wound up having to change that connector in the end because that's where the short was. The pins had it had de-pinned itself a little bit, and the pins wouldn't stay in, so we just bought the whole connector and put a whole new, I guess, a female plug on it. But that made that work. That's a popular video, but it does get you home if you're in a jam. But that is all I got for you guys. I do appreciate you guys hanging out, working with us, wrenching in the shop a little bit. I got grease all over me. No big deal. That's what you do when you work. You get dirty. Thanks you guys for hanging out. Please like and subscribe. We need all the subscribers we get, and we'd enjoy you guys coming back and hanging out with us. Stay clean, everybody.